Oh, there we go. I think we're live. I think we're recording. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of News on China, Episode 8, Back to the Future.
Long time ago.
I actually held my breath, wondering what you'd say. It's been so long.
Yes.
I didn't know. That was like a really last minute thing. So if some of you are joining us for the first time, we usually do a weekly News on China episode here where we go through some of the headlines in China with Dongsheng News, with Tings and Marco. And the last part of it, News on China, Back to the Future for this episode. We always end up changing. I don't know how we got into this habit, but one of these days we're going to have to just settle on something because we're going to run out of ideas. But Back to the Future, it's like a mix of past and present and future because we haven't done an episode in a while. I was obviously in Xinjiang. I'm still doing a bunch more of my videos. I haven't finished all my videos on that, but yeah, no, it's good to finally do this again because I always look forward to this. How have you guys been?
Great, huh?
Been pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, happy Shanghai is coming up.
It is.
Took a few days off during the May 1st holidays, so I think we're pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. You went down to just in Guangdong, just southern Guangdong there. Yeah,
That's
I was
right.
there a little while ago too. That's a really nice spot. What's the name of it? The island?
The Hailing Island. Yeah.
Hailing Island, yeah. I was on the Hailing Island, and then just south of there as well. It's really nice. But yeah, no. So we're gonna jump into the news again, but I'm gonna do something a little bit different in this episode, where I'm gonna introduce, like we always talk about your stuff. You guys always get all the attention, and so I want to introduce something just before your 60-second video that I'd like to talk about, and it ties into something that we've always been speaking about for a while, which is China's kind of space program and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I was fascinated by the difference in coverage compared to falling Chinese rocket parts compared to American falling rocket parts. You know, it was like, you know, with some of the headlines and the titles, like you'd think it was Armageddon or like some sort of a meteorite was going to extinct us like the dinosaurs or something like that, based on how some of the coverage was going. And it's really interesting because when you look back at it compared to, you know, parts from SpaceX rockets falling down, it's more like, you know, you look at the headlines and it's like, oh, there's a beautiful show you can see in the sky tonight. Those weren't falling stars. Those were SpaceX rocket parts. And then and then you had a piece that a SpaceX rocket part that fell into somebody's backyard in Washington State. And it was more like, it wasn't like, oh my God, this could have hit somebody. It was more like, well, would you look at that? I got a SpaceX part in my backyard, and it's pretty cool. I'm gonna make something out of this. This is some pretty good quality steel here, you know. the difference was totally, and the Chinese rocket part ended up landing in the Indian Ocean when it was all said and done. But it sparked all of this conversation, like, you know, like, what are we going to do about space junk? Because this is a really big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, this one obviously isn't a problem because it fell out of the sky. But, you know, why are you only having this conversation now? Space junk has been a problem long before China had any sort of a significant space program. And it's like, oh, this thing that they launched, they're building their own space station. What are we going to do about it? I don't know, maybe go back into the past and not block China from cooperating on your space station so that they don't have to build their own one. Just an idea. Maybe that's how we could tie this into the Back to the Future title here. But,
exactly. But I think it's too late. China has better friends. The Russians are much better friends with China, so now they don't have this problem anymore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, were you guys following that? Were you seeing that coverage and how bizarre it was?
I saw a bit of your tweeters too, and tweets, and I saw one. There was like a thread, like making jokes, like, oh, something like about, oh, what about the bombing in the Chinese embassy in Belgrade?
Yeah, that was mine.
Like,
Yeah. So
actually,
yeah, that is mine. So let me share those. Actually, I can share those.
Exactly.
So those are, so now we usually like to keep things light here. And but this is going to be a bit heavy.
We'll
try to bring it back. We'll try to bring it back because this is some heavy stuff I'm going to be sharing. And I want to answer a question because a lot of people ask me, why do I talk about so much about America? You know, it's almost like a whataboutism to China. But the first whataboutism happens when America is pointing to China's issues, which is based on speculation and really shoddy evidence, when all of the things that they're accusing China of, they're actually doing. So this is a really important piece of perspective here, because when you think about it, the U.S. is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to paint an image that China has a prison population as bad as the U.S., and that it commits crimes as bad as you know, the U.S. did in Gitmo and Abu Ghraib, just to try to convince you to not work with China. So what they're actually doing is they're inadvertently inadvertently making a case as to why you shouldn't work with the U.S. either. Because while they're speculating about this stuff in China and trying to push China back down when they're doing all of these amazing things, they're saying that you shouldn't work with China because they're doing all where we think they're doing all of the same things that we do. And that's a really, really important piece of perspective. So that's what sparked this set of tweets, this series of tweets designed to reflect on the coverage of the rocket. So I'll start with the first one. Actually, the first one isn't mine. It was somebody else. And that's how I got the idea. I saw his tweet and I'm like, you know, this is a really interesting idea. This is a really interesting perspective. So what he said is, breaking, falling Chinese rocket kills 1 million Iraqis. And then he says, you know, oh, sorry, you know, yeah, the Chinese rocket didn't kill 1 million Iraqis. That would be American rockets and bombs and bullets. You know the list. So I saw this and I'm like, at first, I just retweeted it. And I'm like, you know, this is really interesting. This concept is really interesting. So I created a series of it where I retweeted it and then kept retweeting myself. So the first one I put out was breaking. Falling Chinese rocket hits wedding party in Afghanistan, killing 40 civilians, mostly women and children. And my follow-up tweet underneath it, just like how he had a follow-up tweet, was I clipped this wrong, but yeah, it says, wait, never mind, that didn't happen either. Actually, the rocket that hit the wedding party didn't get as much coverage, so memory is a bit foggy on the incident. That was, of course, an American drone strike that hit. Then we have, there we go. That's the correct one there. So I did that wrong. Yeah. Then the next tweet is breaking. Falling Chinese rocket hits Sudanese medical factory, wiping out the region's only producer of TB medicines, delivering a crippling blow to a country already suffering under brutal sanctions. Then the follow-up tweet is, that was a different rocket also. That was Bill Clinton, what they still refer to today as his act of terrorism, where they basically destroyed their medical products there, and they had no other options. There were people who died from that. Then I retweeted that and said, breaking, falling Chinese rocket lands in Laos only to explode later and kill or injure 20,000 people, many of them children. The follow-up is, oh, damn it, not a Chinese unexploded ordnance issue either. This is about U.S. unexploded ordinances, which still continue to kill people today, which is an interesting thing to mention because, you know, if they care so much about human rights and, you know, life and liberty and all this stuff, they would send people into Laos and just fix this problem once and for all and go through and clean up some of their products there that are still killing people. And instead, there's an interesting story behind that where it was actually some British NGOs that went in to clear those things up. And they asked the U.S. for the schematics so that they could safely disarm them. And for the longest time, for many, many years, the U.S. refused to give it to them, saying it was classified information. So they're not cleaning it up themselves. They're letting some other people from some other country go in to clean it up, and they're allowing them to risk their lives to clean up the U.S.'s mess. It's quite an incredible story. Then I retweet that and I say, breaking. Falling Chinese rocket lands on American embassy in Belgrade, killing 3 journalists. And the follow-up is, sorry, guys, another false alarm. It wasn't the U.S. embassy or a Chinese rocket. My memory gets a bit fuzzy with some of these more obscure events that get swept under the rug. So, of course, that was the U.S. bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. If that did happen in reverse, though, you imagine what would have happened. And then the final one was... it
would be World War III.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The final one here was breaking. Falling Chinese rocket lands in Vietnam and is spreading radiation from cosmic rays collected while in orbit. The fallout is expected to create 17 generations of birth defects over large parts of the population, and China refuses to pay any compensation. And then, of course, the follow-up is that for that is, oh, Jesus, This is incredibly embarrassing. I did it again. I'm terribly sorry, guys. It's just that when I vaguely remember these obscure stories, I automatically think it must have been China. After all, I've heard they're the world's the biggest threat to our rules-based order and world. So it's somebody's going to accuse that of being whataboutism, of course, but I'm comparing literally a Chinese rocket part that fell in the Indian Ocean to a lot of these other swept under the rug market stories, which should deserve far much more attention. And I was thinking of doing a follow-up today because obviously we can see what's happening in Israel and Palestine right now with other U.S.-funded rockets falling on Gaza. I just watched a tragic story of a guy who lost his 4 kids in this incredibly uneven conflict that came after a bunch of evictions. And then you look at the U.S., like the U.S., man, I really thought they cared. I mean, based on how they were speaking about Xinjiang, I really thought they cared so much about Muslims, but they were really quiet on this one, saying that, well, we think that any state has the right to self-defense. And then there was a journalist who said, well, that's problematic, isn't it? Because do you recognize Palestine as a state? And he's like, well, I don't want to get into legalities here. All of a sudden, they're going soft on us with their narrative. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I don't know if you guys have been, I know you focus a bit more on China's stories, but I don't know if you guys have been following this at all.
Absolutely, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Very close, actually. Yeah. I have friends in the region too. It's really terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been trying to speak to people on both sides of the fence. I obviously follow a lot of people who empathize with the Palestinian side, as I think they should. I am too. But I also spoke to people who were ex-Israeli soldiers who say that I know, like, a lot of people say that they really crap on this explanation, which is, well, it's complicated, and it's like it's kind of a cop out in some ways. But from the perspective of a soldier, there really are soldiers who are just caught in the middle of this, in terms of being just an instrument of a larger problem that their state is putting them into. Like a lot of these people don't want to be doing this, but it's just a situation that they've designed, which is terrible. But anyways, you know what? I think, like I said, this was heavy stuff. It's going to be hard to move back to a more lighthearted episode, but after this. But I think if we play your video, which is always more upbeat, we can reset our tone back to a little bit more of a.
Well, one thing is that we'll touch on it in a bit in the stories. It's linked to kind of what you're talking about, this whole question of rule-based order and who is really the bigger threat to the sovereignty of nations and world peace and democracy. So we'll touch on that as well. So it links quite nicely back to it. We'll stay.
Yeah, no, that's really good too. I'm probably gonna, for people who are watching this on YouTube, where I'm probably gonna pop a link in the description that is from a guy who really does a great explanation as to why the U.S. specifically uses the rules-based order language, and they try with all their might to avoid saying international law, because they know that if they follow international law, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. This is exactly why they don't want the international criminal courts to investigate what they did in Afghanistan. This is exactly why they criticized them for wanting to look into the Palestinian issue. A rules-based order is like a teacher putting out a set of rules for other people to follow. It's more obscure. And I don't know if you're going to touch on that, but we'll come back to that topic. So yeah, awesome. Yeah. So for now, what I'll do is I will play your video, which I think is episode 40 on your side. It's a 60-second clip. Oh, 50. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So episode 50. It's for people who are listening on the podcast format, because I think this is the first News on China episode. We'll convert over to a podcast format as well. Hang tight for 60 seconds and we'll talk to you in a sec. For everybody else on YouTube, take a look at this video and we will also see you in 60 seconds. Awesome. That is indeed a great video to reset the mood with. And from here, I'll pass it over to you. What's the first story you'd like to speak about?
Well, let's talk about also a hard issue, but with some hope for the future. So one of the most present futures of urban life in China, as you know, are the delivery workers. They are all around the cities. I mean, right now from here, from the window of the apartment, I can see one Meituan guy coming. Is there.
I mean, they're always like Meituan is always in yellow.
The yellow ones, and the Ulema, the blue ones, So this week or 2 weeks ago, actually, something really crazy happened. I'm still trying to understand what was that about, but Beijing's deputy labor secretary disguised himself as a Meituan delivery man and earned $6 in 12 hours, was 41 yuan, and post a video that became like super viral. He was actually, what it was about the video actually?
I mean, it was actually part of a documentary that the municipal department of Beijing they came out with. So it was in the lead up because it was just the May holiday we were just talking about. So the International Workers' Day is actually the May 1st.
Just one thing, remember, Meituan is one more big tech. It's actually from Tencent, right? Is being investigated, it's like under probe, like Alibaba. We also talked about this a few weeks ago. So Chinese government is actually like going after all the big techs for monopoly practices and like.
I want to add something. Here, because actually after the Alibaba story, I was actually thinking about Meituan because as you guys know, I have a brew pub. Of course, you know, we've had so many beers together there.
Always.
But there we go. So, I mean, we do delivery with Meituan, but to access certain packages and access certain prices, you have to agree to only use their platform. And you can't use. I hope we're not going to get kicked off of their platform for me saying this, but. Yeah, and I was like, I think that this is probably something that's going to happen to them also, and then here we are. But the story of this Meituan with the government work and everything like that is so much more interesting as well. So sorry, I'll let you continue. I just wanted to add that.
No, it's true. I mean, this is one of the issues. One of the key issues is exactly what they call the picking one of the sides, because everybody does that, and this is not allowed by law, and China is going after this. But what about the video? Video is an amazing story.
So it was this. Mark already mentioned, like a deputy labor secretary. And what he did was he sort of just dressed up like a worker, a delivery worker, went along with another Meituan delivery worker, and worked for a day. It's just a day in the life of what it looks like. I mean, it's kind of unusual when you think about it to have like an official actually go in, let's see what the worker conditions are, and I'm going to work as a disguised worker. So what he did, it was, he had a goal to make 100 yuan in the day. And you know, you follow him, he gets lost, he can't run fast enough, because that's one of the things like we see all the time here is that there are always delivery workers running, and you start to ask, why are they always running, sweating, stressing? So he's doing that. At one point, he has a delivery where he's late for 20 minutes, and for that, he actually gets a 60% fine. So at the end of the day, he makes all of 61 yuan for 12 hours of work. 41. And so the most mostly watched part of the segment was actually the Secretary Wang. He was sitting exhausted at 9 p.m. when his shift ended on the curb. And he said some really important words, you know. He was saying, this money is just too hard to earn. And he said that he felt humiliated in the process of the day working. But the thing is, what this had, the repercussion or the consequence of this is that huge amounts of views online. I mean, just the day after it was posted, they got 500 million views and 34,000 comments. And some of the comments are really striking about, you know, what people felt about the situation. It said, you know, office people making policies, they don't really understand the risks that people take if they're just sitting in the offices. You know, we hope that others will follow the deputy director's example. And another person said, it says, only if you come from the masses or are in touch with the masses can you uncover problems. So this was posted online, and one of the responses actually that came is that Ulama and Meituan have also said that they're not going to charge fines for delayed deliveries anymore, because that's one of the big things. Why did he end up making only 41 yuan, not his 100 goal? Is because he actually got fined so much for being late and not arriving on time, even though he basically worked his ass off. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word here. So very interesting kind of, I don't know, approach to public policy.
This is, I really hope they do this more, because I mean, they do. I mean, everywhere else in their policy making, it does show that there is a care for the bottom kind of 50% or whatever it is to try to lift them up. So it only makes sense to do stuff like this. And, during the pandemic, these Meituan drivers, delivery guys, they were like celebrated as heroes. There was artwork made about them and stuff like that. And I was thinking, I was worried that, are we just going to forget about them afterwards and be like, okay, yeah, thanks for your help, but yeah, that was, the pandemic's over now. Hurry up, deliver me my fried rice. It's like, but and here there's less constraints to do such a thing. At least this is my theory. I may be a little bit off base here, but I'm going to put my theory out there. Whereas in a lot of Western countries where becoming an elected official is so, lobbying is such an essential part of that. Fundraising is such an essential part of that. That if you did too much of that, sometimes your corporate sponsors might have an issue with it. They'd be like, "Whoa, hold on a second. We're the ones funding you here." I mean, that might be a little bit of a pessimistic view here, but largely speaking, that there isn't the same kind of lobbying problem here, at least anymore. So with the freedom to do this, I really hope that they start doing more of it.
No, I mean, that was brilliant. Imagine so Meituan was already under probe. That is, the investigation is going on, and then official from Beijing does this post in social media, and this is like 500 million views, and people are like shocked. So I mean, I imagine for the workers, delivery workers, they're like, okay, somebody is doing something and denouncing. It is not that this is the first time. Actually, if you go to the Chinese media in the last year, there was lots of articles and stories about that. So it's an ongoing problem. But finally now looks like something's happening. Just for instance, for you, you mentioned like the pandemic, like last year, 2020, there was almost 2 million new delivery workers, because many of them also came with the pandemic, because right after the pandemic, the services were still not doing great. Restaurants was closed, all this kind of stuff. So they went, try to do something, try to make some money. But one thing it's important, which is, it's actually, this is all around the world. This is how these platforms works. And this is one of the most, I would say, the most terrible things and hard for the workers, because it's a sort of like dictatorship of the algorithms. This is all about algorithms. In case of Meituan, for instance, since 2015, they don't have people mediating the systems. It's just a computer, just artificial intelligence and algorithms saying how many minutes you have to get this food in that place. Sometimes just impossible. Sometimes even the guy, he said that there was one of the delivers was just like, oh, he was saying like 24 minutes, but took almost 1 hour. The GPS was wrong, or the Beidou, I don't know, the navigation systems was wrong. So this is the kind of thing that's happening. And because of that, it's crazy how much they rush and how much troubles and accidents this causes in big cities.
It really is hurtful to see also, because I've seen before where you see the look on some of these guys' faces while they're running to their next location, and you just look at them and you just feel really sorry for them. You're like, oh my God. I mean, this is a good warning too. Like, we're going to move towards an AI world. Like these are the lessons we need to learn to build in some sort of a human component, whatever. Okay, we're going to use AI, but at least build in some sort of a humanistic component to it, because this will just drive people to the bottom. I know somebody who worked. I knew him I was friends with his father. I knew him since he was in high school. It was like 12 years ago. And he was just he's lazy. He's a lazy, guy. He didn't finish high school. You can imagine how disappointed his father is. His father owns a very tiny little hole in the wall kind of convenience shop, and was hoping that his kids, he's got 2 sons, would do better than him. So very disappointed that he didn't finish high school, but he started doing, Meituan deliveries. He didn't last long. He just decided, he became a cook in a restaurant, because this is not for people. I mean, I'm friends with this guy. Nobody's going to know who he is, but he's lazy. He's a lazy dude. And the guys who work for Meituan and survive and continue working for them, they are not lazy. They are some of the hardest working people you will find. And I'm really happy about this story for that reason.
I mean, just a little anecdote. I mean, because there's a actual longer documentary, is 30 minutes long. But in terms of that human side, is one of the driver that Mr. Wang was following the whole day, teaching him the ropes. He taught him how to like nap on his bike. How he can take a little rest, and at the end of it, he actually goes to his house and cooks him a dinner with his wife, in a very, very humble house. And just talking about, what is the earning money for? How do they actually live? And it gave really quite a human, view. It's like, not only has he a lot of respect for the work of delivery workers, but as actually going to their houses and talking about, just what does life look like. So I would, we can also link it for anyone who wants to watch it.
Is this only on like kind of the Chinese internet, or did they put this out on any sort of foreign platforms?
I think just in
Chinese
internet.
This is the kind of thing that China needs to be putting out also. The stuff that they, put out into the West is overly optimistic and overly positive and overly saying, no, there's no problems here. Everything's going fine. We're doing well. But this human side saying, no, there are issues. We're trying to fix them, but there are issues. There are serious issues we need to fix. Is so much more easy to connect with, in terms of showing foreigners the real China, instead of just trying to pretend like everything's perfect. And they don't try to pretend like anything's perfect internally. So why not just transpose some of that honesty out into your foreign media content as well? But yeah, so the link that you're going to share, does it have English subtitles at least on the?
No, but we can have a look to see if there's anything. I doubt there is though.
I gotta get somebody to English subtitle this stuff, and I gotta talk to somebody about it.
That would be actually great. Yeah, I mean, but just coming back to Meituan thing, is that, I mean, the other side is their side, is the side of the big tech company. They made their profits is just going on and just increasing a lot. They had, last year, 2019, they had 330 million yuan profit. Like, this is net profit. Last year, they more than doubled their profit, 768.5 million yuan, which is almost like $118 million net profit. And the thing is that, what is this, the secret? The secret is squeezing the workers, because guess what? They pay $5.9 billion in wages. But this is 74.8% of their costs. So this is the secret sauce of this guy.
Well, I'll tell you another secret sauce, at least in the beginning, is squeezing the restaurants also. Because before there was any real competition, we were paying, if I remember correctly, we were paying like 20% of our order to Meituan. Like 20%. If somebody ordered some beer or takeaway beer and stuff like that through the Meituan app, and some food, 20%, just for the, and when you look at the size of the bill on some of these things, for sure that delivery guy is getting such a tiny percentage of that.
It is, and the other big problem is that they are not even employees of Meituan. Meituan actually hires a third-party company. His big part is his name is Chuhuo, and they actually hire the workers. But of course, they don't have rights. They don't have anything. So I mean, this is a big problem right now all over the world. I mean, Uber is the same in
the gig. What do they call it? The gig industry or something like that,
or the industry, exactly, absolutely. So I mean, it's time to do something. And I think what was interesting this last 2 weeks, and actually the whole thing that the Chinese government is doing with big tech is talking about that. I mean, President Xi actually made a speech like 2 weeks ago, and he was actually highlighting these issues like delivery workers, couriers, and truck drivers, to say we have to take care of these people because they are not being paid well, and the conditions of work are just getting worse. Even like lots of workers saying that at the beginning, this happened the same in Uber. I follow a lot in Brazil, other countries. When they start, they give you lots of bonus. So they attract a lot of people to work for them. And then they become a monopoly. And then what they say, guess what? No more bonus. Now you have to work, instead of work 8 hours, I have to work 12, 14, 6 hours to get the same amount of money. So this is what's going on. And I just hope this video helps and the investigations change something, because this is really a hard situation for these people that are, I mean, all of us, we depend of everything is online.
You're talking about the truck drivers, the delivery drivers, the food delivery guys. It's now such an important part of the fabric of the entire economy and our lives.
And restaurants.
And restaurants, exactly, and pubs and everything.
And brew pubs. I hope the one thing I hope is that I hope I don't have any Meituan corporate management fans on my channel who's going to see this video and they're going to be like, "All right, now you're off our platform." Because actually in the beginning, especially when there wasn't much competition and Meituan was the big guy, you just got to play, even as a restaurant, you just got to play ball. They're like, these are our conditions. And it's like, well, what other choice do we have? And it affects the entire economy, because all of the other restaurants are playing ball. They're going to make this an important part of their business. Landlords are going to end up increasing the rent, knowing that, okay, the restaurant industry is doing well because of this new component as well. I mean, it creates a whole thing where you've really got to keep a close eye on it to make sure that the concentration of power and wealth doesn't go too far towards one side. And I feel like that's what we're seeing happening with the focusing on the workers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, they total revenue last year was $18 billion. I mean, come on. Share a little bit of that with the workers, with the restaurant owners. So and
so one thing to anybody who may be not empathizing with a restaurant owner, like, oh, what right does this guy have? He's a restaurant owner. I tell you, like most people through the pandemic. So while Meituan was just thriving and their revenue went through the roof, so many of us closed. So many of us closed down. We continued to pay our workers while they were, in their hometowns waiting this out. A lot of places paid a reduced salary, but we still were paying to keep them going. We got some relief on rent. Some of us got some relief on rent, but it was hard. People who still managed to survive. A lot of them had to put more money into the company and stuff like that. So it was a tough time, but Meituan, I mean, they've got a pretty good business model for,
They made a lot more money last year. So.
I mean, you saw the same thing in the US, right? It was like there was a certain select few group of people that became far more rich during the pandemic.
Amazon, Amazon is just
the whole structure of the system allowed that to happen. So I'm glad to see that the structure of this is being scrutinized to a certain degree. But so did you have more on this topic, or do you want to move to the next one?
Next one. We can move on to the next one.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
So the next one was also in the video, the second one that you showed. So interesting. It's an article that came out in the Washington Post. Famous friends of China. And so they posted an article called, "Did the Pandemic Shake Chinese Citizens' Trust in the Government?" And well, it comes in the context of, as we know, especially in the global north, there has been increasing negative views about China and has worsened after the pandemic. And we also know that these global north countries generally control the global narrative around China, or the understanding around China. So this article is going into what do the Chinese people actually think. So it was actually led, a research study was led by York University professors, so not far from where both Daniel, you and I grew up in. And it happened right after the reopening of Wuhan back in last April. And Kerry Wu, who's the professor, he led a team to survey nearly 20,000 people across all the provinces and regions, and with a good sample size, that is representative sample size. It was a pretty innovative approach. He actually, because you can't do in-person surveys with the pandemic and everything, actually recruited hundreds of university students around China to do online one-on-one interviews. We know that surveys with one-on-one, produce results that are way more accurate. So what did they find? They wanted to find out what was the public support for the Chinese government, specifically the response to the pandemic. So the public support is at an all-time high, 98% for the national level government. And then it drops a bit down to 91% at the township level, which is pretty common here in China, that there's a sort of hierarchical level of trust, preferring the national level over the local. And another thing is that almost half of those respondents said that they got more trusting of the government because of the response, how they responded to the pandemic, and 1% expressed cynicism. So, it's interesting to see how the institutional trust also links to how well they performed, and we already know that by this time, and why the pandemic response was more effective and also more accepted by the people themselves. So quite interesting that Washington Post posts something like this, and we'll get back to why we think that is. But it's also nothing new. Right?
No, yeah. Well, for us living in China, I mean, this isn't a very difficult thing to believe when you're talking to people on the ground. So, I mean, when you see people overseas saying, oh, the Chinese people want us to help liberate them while they're suffering incredibly, infrastructure from the pandemic and everything like that. And they're still saying like, oh, we need to save these people. It's like, maybe China can save you somehow, especially if you look at maybe some of the methods and some of the things they use. You don't have to copy China's model, but it's really a pity that people don't look at this in an honest way and say, man, they have a 98% approval rating, which once again, for us on the ground is very easy for us to believe. What is it they're doing right? I'm not saying don't find the things that they're doing wrong. I'm not saying don't criticize, but at least, get out of your, whatever it is that's preventing you, your superiority complex or whatever it is, to take a more open-minded look at China. Because I mean, this is a number that's believable to us as we travel around China, and we see the government continually hitting home run after home run and improving the lives and the infrastructure, the quality of the country. Over this past decade, it makes sense. But it's in.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, it's just what we should probably mention also is this is a follow up from the previous report was from the Harvard Ash Institute,
exactly.
Which put them at, what was it, 94.5 or 95% or something like that. Even back then. This is not coming from internal, CPC led.
It was 93.1 actually. And that was interesting. Exactly. First, because of this, it's just like now we have a Canadian, York University and Harvard University, and things published in Washington Post. So I'm sorry, this is not the survey conducted by the Communist Party of China. But I think it's also very interesting because you were saying that, let's try to understand why this is happening. And I remember that the report from this Harvard University was interesting because they had some explanations. And at that point, this actually was in between 2003 and 2016. So it's like the first 4 years of President Xi Jinping first mandate. But what was the two main issues? First, poverty alleviation and all the welfare improvement. Second was fight against corruption. That was the two main issues that is making people say, okay, I think this government is increasing our lives, and of course, with this last one from York University and Washington Post, is the issue of the COVID, the fight against COVID. So you have this, as you said, like 3 home runs in a row: fight against corruption, poverty alleviation, eradication of the poverty, extreme poverty in the country, and the big success against COVID. So 98%. I mean, I remember in Brazil, I don't know if you know that, but after Lula, the second mandate of Lula, because he was president from 2003 to 2010, when he finished his second mandate, he had 87% of approval. That was absolutely in no way in history of democracy, Western democracies, a president after 8 years gets 87% of approval. But guess what? Here in China, it's like 98. It's like, wow. That's not easy to do.
And in true American style, they didn't like Lula either, did they? You know,
No.
America didn't like, you know, you don't go around flaunting your 80+% approval rating that we could only dream of. No. You stop caring about the little guy so much. But no, it is amazing. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why when you look at the new fund from America, for $300 million per year in basically anti-China propaganda. Usually what this involves when trying to destabilize a country or a rival, or for whatever other reason is you want to destabilize a country, is you focus on propaganda within that country. You try to get information to the people of that country to undermine their confidence in their own government. And or this is the principle of how sanctions work as well. You sanction a country to make the people suffer, and then they'll blame their own government, even though this is from external forces, and they'll want to rise up against their government. It's difficult to sanction China. They're trying it in Xinjiang, and this is exactly the reason they're doing it. They know that there are so many Uyghurs who have cotton farms who are going to be affected by this. They know there are so many Uyghurs who are legitimately working in these factories, earning a living. They know there are so many Uyghur women who have been liberated from their status in family by being able to support themselves. And I've heard stories of, you know, for example, you know, when you're in a situation when a potentially an abusive husband, for example, knows that you've got no other option, the relationship can deteriorate to immense levels where the woman still has no other option, that she can't leave. Like all of these, you know, these human rights conventions, even recognized by the UN, about the need to provide your citizens with an opportunity to work, to live with dignity, to be able to walk down the street safely. This is what the US is trying to undermine in Xinjiang with these kinds of, you know, sanctions and things like that. They know what it's supposed to do. However, for the rest of China, I don't think you're going to see as much of a focus anymore on trying to convince the general population in general that their government sucks, because how can you compete with 98%? How could you even have the audacity to say that when you've got over 500,000 people in your own country that have died from COVID that you couldn't do anything for? So onto my main point, that's why in the language surrounding the grant for $300 million per year, they're focusing on propaganda overseas. They're focusing on educating other countries about the dangers of the Belt and Road Initiative to try to stop China's progress outside of China. That's their only hope. And they're doing a pretty good job at it. They're doing a pretty good job. They're very good at convincing other countries that China is, when you really think about it, as evil as America. They don't word it that way. They don't word it that way. But anyways, they do a pretty good job at that. But how do you compete with 98%?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. You know, the line that was, you know, we aren't against the Chinese people, but we're against the Chinese Communist Party doesn't work, because the Chinese people overwhelmingly support their party and their government. But what's interesting that you're saying and focusing on the international is that there was also, it's like a week of surveys that was published this week. So we have a lot of surveys. But The Guardian published a global survey, this time surveying 53 countries on global democracy. So, you know,
again, The Guardian.
These are big best friends of China.
Well, they republished it, right? It's a big report. It's a big PDF report.
Yeah.
But
they published it.
Yeah.
And, you know, guess which country was seen as the biggest threat to democracy?
It's a country that the three of us will not be surprised at.
You just started. You just like laid it out perfect for us by showing, whoops, I thought it was China's rockets. No, it isn't. Well, it's that country's rockets.
Overwhelmingly, countries see America as a bigger threat to their democracy, including Mexico and Canada. I looked at the report. I saw the report, including Mexico and Canada. Now, you've got some anomalies. You've got some things like, for example, Vietnam. Vietnam sees China as a bigger threat than the U.S. And in some aspects, I mean, they're subject to this propaganda push by America. But even aside from that, even not responsible for America, you're more likely to have issues with your neighbors than you are somebody on the other side of the ocean. And that's potentially part of the component with Mexico and Canada seeing America as the bigger threat to their democracy. But overall, when you look at the global picture, overwhelmingly, it leans towards pretty much everybody thinking that America is the bigger threat. And that is,
I mean, there's that. And there's also two issues that people raised in that same survey about what are the issues that are the biggest threats to democracy. The first being economic inequality. And the second, related to our first story, big tech. And in the US, it's actually the #1 concern. So, I mean, when we're talking about looking at China and what it's done, these were pretty much like exactly what Marco had just said. Well, you look at last year, you know, the home runs or big victories as taking care of people as end of extreme poverty and then also COVID. But then right now, the big campaign is challenging big tech. So which government in the world is actually addressing on the main concerns that are the biggest for pretty much this planet? And so there's this question when we think it's like, well, what exactly is democracy? Is it this like counting votes every 4 years at the ballot boxes? Or is it about getting mass support of the vast majority of people and, you know, making sure they survive, making sure they're living better lives and reeling in the, you know, the worst excesses like corruption and big capital, big tech, you know, all those kinds of questions. So kind of takes us back to the question of, you know, why is The Guardian or even the Washington Post interested in publishing these stories now? It's a kind of switched in tone, right? Publishing these sort of favorable stories about China. I mean, we've published a series that Washington Post came out with in February, which is on China-Africa stories that they paired with the Carey Institute at Johns Hopkins. Where they look at basically it's debunking myths in Western media. And they even said when they introduced the series, why? They said the hardline narrative of US policymakers is wrong and what they call full of inaccuracies. So from alleged debt diplomacy, asset seizures, we've talked about these things, what Huawei, various hacks. So they're actually interested in now publishing stories to get a more accurate picture. It's like, yeah, you can't just say, you know, the Chinese people are ready for a regime change. No, we actually have to see how is the Chinese government actually responding to the people.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting, Daniel, because we've been discussing this last weeks. So why is Washington Post actually doing that? I mean, come on, we know Washington Post is an asset of State Department. This is everybody knows in US all around. So why they now, I mean, in the middle of all this fake news about China, all this like insane attacks about China, there's a newspaper like Washington Post publishing, for instance, like in details every week, projects of BRI in Africa. How is, I mean, very good for the countries, for the people, development, et cetera, or even this survey now saying, oh, I'm sorry, guys, don't pretend you're going to overthrown the government because 98% of people support the government. But why Washington Post is doing that? I think this is I'm going to do like you did. I'm throwing my post here. Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, one thing is clear: Biden's not Trump, and we know that, and we'll be also discussing that. They will have different tactics. They are keeping all the sanctions. They are keeping all the fake news. But they are also doing different things. They are also trying to reestablish their alliances, the European Union with Japan, with Australia, the Quad with India, Japan, Australia, all of this. I don't know if you guys saw last week, there was a viral short video of Hillary Clinton speaking in Chatham House, this big UK imperial think tank, and saying, guys, I'm sorry, China, we are losing. We are losing the competition. We allow them to come. We made deals with them, but they are not going to be a free market. Therefore, and she almost apologized. We need to subsidize the companies. The state has to subsidize.
We need to become a socialist communist.
Exactly. It's like, oh, we have to take our means of production, bring back our means of production. It's almost like a Marxist sentence in the mouth of Hillary Clinton. But this is not a joke, because some of these people in the core of the U.S. government, they know that fake news are not enough. They know that. This is what Washington Post is also saying, guys. If you want to win this competition with China, you better move your ass and work harder, because the countries are not just going to listen to fake news when they are seeing bridges and ports and industries all funded by China. And guess what? U.S. are doing zero. Same with the vaccines right now. Why Biden is like, oh, okay, let's suspend the patents of the vaccine. Let's do something. Yeah, because China already exported 240 million doses of vaccines to the whole planet. So I think they are shifting the tactics. Some of them know, okay, fake news is not enough. We better do something for the world. I don't know if they're going to do, but some movements are different in the last couple of months.
I'll throw out a few theories as well. Then I don't know what the answer is, but I could throw out a few theories. One, a lot of news agencies are run by corporate sponsors in terms of advertising and stuff like that. There could be some corporate sponsors who want access to the Chinese market, and they are increasingly getting access to the Chinese market, like Tesla and stuff like that, where because they're the real rulers of America. I mean, politicians and everything. Maybe they're saying, okay, let's take a little bit of a softer approach so that we can access the Chinese market, because they are opening up more, and we there's a lot of money to be made there. That's more of a conspiratorial aspect. Maybe something a little bit more realistic is that there's just fatigue. There's anti-China fatigue, where it's the same thing that I said about China, that I criticized China for in reverse. When China's just saying, oh, we're perfect, nothing's wrong, eventually you get kind of tired of it, and it's just like too fake. Well, maybe just crapping on China all the time is just a little bit overboard, especially when some of your journalists have tried so hard to twist positive stories into negative stories, where people are like, I'm not really believing this anymore. So what they do is they throw their audience a bone once in a while. It's the same kind of a thing that people accuse Bellingcat of doing. Bellingcat is like a fake version of WikiLeaks. It's like, yeah, we'll leak approved American leaks, but then when it's really important, when it's issues on, Syrian chemical attack or anything like this, then we're going to start slandering the people who really want to push that too much. You throw people a bone and you get a little bit more authenticity. That might be an aspect also. Maybe there's an even further additional aspect now where it just is too inflammatory. It's too ridiculous. It's too hypocritical to still be criticizing China this much while you're still funding Israel hundreds of millions of dollars to fight back against Palestinian rocks and glorified fireworks. And I've been seeing that online, where people are, they see a new article come out saying that Xinjiang is essentially an open air prison, and then somebody retweeted it and said, you misspelt Gaza. And it's like, while all of this is going on, while American officials are dancing around the language saying, well, it's complicated. Well, let me show you how complicated it is. Let me show you, because if somebody takes an issue with me calling Palestinian rockets glorified fireworks, well, let me show you a chart from the 2014 conflict here. Let's take a look at this. These are the numbers from the 2014 conflict.
Wow.
Yeah. So, civilians killed in Gaza versus Israel due to aggressions from the Palestinian side. I mean, this paints a pretty clear picture. Now, one thing I need to mention is I think that Bernie Sanders used the 550 children killed number And Israel got really upset at that and demanded an apology. I'm not sure if it was satirical news, but apparently the Israeli numbers, I think they really did take an issue with this 550 number. They said it was overstated by 12 deaths. So they had a really big issue with that. They're like, you need to revise that. We didn't kill 550 kids. It's 12 more than we actually killed. It's like, there's when you're continuing to push this story, this illusion that you care about Muslims in China and all of this stuff that you can't prove is happening, while actual things are happening in a region that you're funding these atrocities for. I think maybe there's some people saying, okay, this is too embarrassing. Maybe we gotta lay off a little bit and add a little bit more balance here. We won't necessarily go hard against Israel because it's an important ally to the US, but maybe we just got to like tone down on the hypocrisy a little bit. Those are my 3 theories I'll put out there. Again, we can only guess here.
Yeah, I mean, I think even like all this Bidenomics thing, all the new measures and like $6 trillion he's proposing. I mean, he knows. I mean, you can't compete with China if your own country is absolutely divided. People are poor. There's no jobs. There's no infrastructure. There's no capacity of production. I mean, right now, China is responsible for 28% of the industrial production of the world. US is just 18%. So this is a big gap. If they don't fill this gap, I mean, I'm sorry, you can throw a lot of fake news. That's not gonna work. So I think this is clear. There's something going on and I don't.
Yeah, and with that much production, with that much of the world's production happening, they still manage to keep a lower per capita emissions, pollution here than a lot of the other places who are virtue signaling China about environmental issues as well, which is pretty important to note as well. The world's factory is still managing to do better per capita. So yeah. We're approaching the 1 hour. We usually try to cut it off at this point, but did you have any other stories that you wanted to? You're good?
No, we're pretty covered.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool. I think, that's good. It's good to be back. We'll try to do this. I'm supposed to be going to Xinjiang again, so we'll see if this gets delayed or yeah. We'll see if this gets delayed or not. But hopefully we'll be back on our once per week schedule here. As long as A, I'm not in Xinjiang, or B, you guys aren't on a beach sipping pina colada again. That did delay us for 1 week there.
It's true. It's also our
it's a worthy cause. I'm not gonna say anything about that.
And you were working in Xinjiang. We are just not working in Hailing.
Yeah, you usually mix your trips together though. You got a little bit of work, a little bit of that. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining, and thanks to everybody else for tuning in. Again, we'll probably turn this one into a podcast episode, and we'll probably see you guys next week.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.